from Swansea and radiol o Abertawe, Professor Ben Evans is Head of Aerospace Engineering at Swansea University. Mae ganddo radd meistr o Brifysgol Caergrawnt a doethuriaeth o Brifysgol Abertawe. His Masters in Aerospace and Aerothermal Engineering is from Jesus College, Cambridge University, and his PhD in Computational Fluid Dynamics from Swansea University. Mae Ben yn arbenigwyr yn ei faes ac wedi gweithio I brif gwmnïau'r byd. As a respected expert in his field, he's worked with companies such as Airbus and Rolls-Royce and is part of the design team for the Bloodhound land speed record attempt. Croeso, welcome Ben.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Wow, thank you very much. It's lovely to be here. So my name is Ben, and I'm a professor in aerospace engineering. But in the words of Dylan Thomas, who is that great poet from the town that I hail from, Swansea, to begin at the beginning, or, well, almost the beginning. This is Ben Evans from about 30 years ago, on my first day in school. So I went to a brilliant, but in the grand scheme of things, fairly ordinary secondary school. I went to Bishopston Comprehensive School, and I still say to this day that my time at that school was some of the best years of my life. I had 5 fantastic years at this school. So this is me, 11 years old, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, keen to get to school. And I guess what I want to explore, this is how it started, and what I'm going to explore in this talk is how on earth did I end up 30 years on as a professor of aerospace engineering. So this is what I spend my time doing today. So a bunch of my time is spent teaching students aerospace engineering. My specific expertise is in something called aerodynamics. Now, you might think, oh, I know what aerodynamics is. You must spend a lot of time in a wind tunnel. Well, I have spent some time in wind tunnels. The truth is, I don't spend a lot of my time doing this. This is me and a colleague of mine, Dr. Claire Wood, a few years ago, proving that the geeks can fight back, okay? Trying to explain to the world what an aerodynamicist does. I've also been involved in some really high-profile engineering projects. You might have heard about the Bloodhound project. So quite a few years ago, I was invited to lead on the aerodynamic design for what we hope one day will be the world's fastest car. So what I want to do this afternoon is take you on this journey of those kind of 30 years, from Ben Evans, the 11-year-old starting in school, through to me today as a professor at Swansea University. And this strip of tarmac, which is just out to the west of Swansea where I live, plays an important part in that story. So a couple of years after I started in secondary school, I started feeling a bit sorry for myself. There was no need for me to be sorry for myself. The reason I was sorry for myself is because I'd never been on an aeroplane, okay? Now, lots of my friends had been on aeroplanes. After the school summer holidays, we'd come back, and they'd been flying to Spain or whatever it was that they'd been on their holidays. And my family, our classic summer holiday was pack up the car, hitch up the caravan, go to France. And at 13 years old, I'd never been on a plane. And I begged my parents to take me on a plane, just because all my friends seemed to have done it and I wanted to do it. And I can remember still to this day that flight out to Spain, sitting there looking out of the window. We just punched through the clouds. It had been a grey day when we'd taken off. We punched through the clouds, and now the skies were blue, and it was as if we were floating in the sky. And I remember thinking to myself, this is magic. There was something incredible about being up in the sky, and technology somehow has put us up there. And ever since, I've been fascinated by that question of how on earth do you put something that weighs many, many tons, tens, even hundreds of tons, up into the sky? And even though for 20 years or so now, I've been exploring that question, how do aeroplanes fly? How do wings work? I teach students every day the answer to that question. I still think there's a little bit of magic involved. It's one of those things that kind of causes awe and wonder in my life, that we're able to do this. So I decided, after that first flight in an aeroplane, that I wanted to become a pilot. That was my big dream. I was going to become an airline pilot, learn how to fly aeroplanes. So I asked my dad to take me out to Swansea Airport, which wasn't too far from where I grew up. We went to the flying school there, and I asked the question, how much does it cost to learn to fly? Now, it turns out it's quite expensive to learn how to fly, but that didn't put me off. So what I did was I got a Saturday job. So my first ever job, I'm not even sure if it's legal to do that these days, but then, as a 13-year-old, I used to work at my local paper shop, the Newsagents, And I'd work from 5 a.m. on a Saturday morning until 9 a.m., and they'd give me £10 for my efforts. My job was to put the supplements into the Saturday newspapers. And I used to stand there for 4 hours doing that, and I'd get £10 for doing it. I also got myself a paper round. In fact, at one point, I had a paper round before school and a paper round after school, plus the Saturday job, which was just enough money to once a month go out to the airport and have a flying lesson. And between the age of 13 and 16, I learned to fly. And at 16 years old, I flew solo for the first time. That was the first time they let me fly away on my own in an aeroplane. And by the time I was 17, I had a private pilot's license. In fact, I got my pilot's license before I got my driving license, which I think is pretty cool. And around about that time, and kind of through those years, I guess a big part of this is because of some of the brilliant teachers I had at Bishopston Comprehensive School. But I realized that I was pretty good at maths. Realized I was pretty good at physics. And, you know, for students who kind of fall into that camp, my teachers started pushing me in the direction of A-levels and studying for A-levels. And what my teachers really wanted me to do was the classic, kind of if you're kind of mathsy, sciencey, the classic double maths, physics, chemistry combination. And I said to them, no, I'm not going to do that because I love geography. Okay, so I did this slightly odd combination of A-levels, which is double maths, physics, and then geography, because I loved geography and didn't want to let it go. I was passionate about it and didn't want to say goodbye to geography. So that's what I studied at Gorseinon College for my A-levels. And that's where I studied after Bishopston Comprehensive School. And I was still at this point desperate to become a pilot. That's what I thought I was going to do. I thought one day I'm going to fly big airliners for British Airways. So I wrote British Airways a letter, okay? And I'd encourage you to have a go at this, right? If there are some companies you think, maybe one day I'd love to work for you, write them a letter and see what happens. So I wrote to British Airways. I think I was probably about 17 at this point, saying, I've got myself a pilot's license. I'm doing these A-levels. I'd love to fly for you one day. And they wrote back a lovely letter saying, thank you very much for getting in touch. Unfortunately, we're not recruiting pilots at the moment. But what we recommend you do is go and study at university. Apply to university and study something relevant to aviation or aerospace. Which is why, that's the main reason I decided, okay, I'm going to study aerospace engineering. That's what I'm going to go and study. It was still part of this big dream to become an airline pilot. And my teachers started encouraging me to apply to some of the kind of the elite universities in the UK. I wasn't convinced I was able to get into Cambridge or Imperial or some of these big universities in the UK, but I gave it a go. And it turns out that I found myself one day here at the entrance to Jesus College, Cambridge. At this point, I really didn't believe I had it in me to get a place here. And do you know what I think was, I did, and here's what I think was probably one of the secrets to my success. There was a 2-day application process to get into Cambridge in those days. And on day one, we had to do an exam. And I remember turning up here as this kid from Swansea, feeling really out of my depth, feeling like I really didn't belong here. And then I got sat down in this big exam hall that looked a bit like the Great Hall from Harry Potter, looking around at all these other people who seemed to know what they were doing, and I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing at all, and started attempting this exam paper. And it was the most difficult exam I have ever sat in my life, okay? I walked out of that going, I'm not sure I could answer any of the questions on that. I felt completely out of my depth. And I rang home that night, and I told my mum on the phone, well, I don't think Cambridge is where I'm going to be studying, because that exam I did today was just impossible. And she gave me some really good advice. She said to me, Ben, don't worry about it. Okay, it's not the end of the world. Whether or not you get into Cambridge, that doesn't really matter. Just try and enjoy your time there now. You've got another day there tomorrow. It might be the last time you ever visit Cambridge. Just try and enjoy yourself. So on the following day, the second day of the application process, I had 4 interviews throughout the course of the day. And I'd already kind of decided, well, I'm not going to study here. This doesn't, you know, I'd taken all the pressure off myself. I think all the nerves had gone away because I'd convinced myself I wasn't going there. And I just tried to have a good time. I got involved in some interesting conversations with the professors who were interviewing me. And I think that was probably one of the secrets to my success and the reason they offered me a place at Cambridge, is because when I turned up to those interviews, rather than try to prove to them that I was clever enough to be at Cambridge, I just tried to get along with them. I kind of, what I managed to show them was that I was teachable, that I was perhaps a likable person. And that is massive. Figuring out what it looks like to be a likable person is massive. And will probably have as much to do with your future success as actually your talent or academic ability will. So I spent a few years at Cambridge. It taught me a whole bunch of stuff. It obviously taught me about aerospace engineering. It also taught me that I absolutely love Southwest Wales. It hadn't dawned on me until I lived for 4 years in Cambridge that not everywhere has a beach. So I grew up not far from Caswell Beach, just west of Swansea. Grew up surfing. That's where I'd hang out with my friends. And while I was at Cambridge, I kind of realized, hang on a minute, that is important to me. That's as important to me as my career is. And I kind of made the decision, I want to base my life back in Southwest Wales, and I'm going to let that dictate what I do career-wise. And I started thinking, okay, so I've learned how these planes are designed. I've learned about the physics and the maths behind how aircraft get up into the sky. Perhaps that is more interesting than actually flying them. So I kind of changed my whole vision for what I wanted to do with my life. I said, priority number one is, I'm going to settle back down in Southwest Wales, and I'm going to let that dictate where I go. So I returned to Swansea and embarked on something called a PhD, or a Doctorate of Philosophy, okay? So it's kind of like a degree you can do where you focus on research after you've done your kind of normal university degree. And if you get it, you get to call yourself doctor, okay, which is kind of cool. And I did this in something called computational fluid dynamics, which is basically virtual wind tunnel testing. So you can imagine maybe that an aerodynamicist works in a wind tunnel or uses wind tunnels. What I do, it's just my wind tunnels are virtual. They're in big supercomputers, okay? So we design the computer code in the research group that I'm now a part of at Swansea, where we model aerodynamic flows. And at the end of my PhD, I got invited to be involved in this project. At this point in time, I wasn't really sure that I wanted to stay in academia, stay working at a university. I was thinking maybe I'll become a school teacher. Maybe I'll go and work in industry. I really wasn't sure. And this project came along. And I was invited by a chap called Richard Noble to design the world's fastest car. The problem was set to me, what does a 1,000 mile per hour car look like? And it grabbed my attention. I thought, that is an interesting problem to solve. That feels like a good next step in my career. So I said, yeah, I'll give it a go, thinking that this would take me 2 or 3 years. We're now 15 years on from that question being asked of me, and we're still plugging away at this. And I joined the team for Bloodhound. So I got one job at Swansea University, and they seconded me out to work on Bloodhound. And I worked on this full-time for 4 years. And during that time, really fell in love with research and fell in love with asking these difficult questions, trying to solve difficult problems. We're still plugging away at this. You might have seen recently this has been in the news. We're now looking for a driver. So if anybody fancies driving a car and traveling at 1,000 miles an hour, come and speak to me. And there are a few things, really, when I was thinking about, like, what are the key messages I want to communicate to you? Okay? How did I go on this journey through choosing my A-levels to what I'm going to study at university and my job and my career, and now arriving at this point where I'm a university professor. So this year, the university decided that they were going to bestow that title upon me, which is kind of the most senior title you can have within a university. I now head up a department, so I'm the head of the aerospace department at Swansea University, responsible for about 25 staff who are working in all areas of research under the umbrella of aerospace. Almost 1,000 students we're training and teaching and skilling to be the future aerospace engineers. And there were 5 things, as I've been thinking about this over the last few years, there were 5 things that I wanted to say to you as bits of advice. And it doesn't matter where you're going to go in your career, I think these will be helpful. 1, follow your passions. Figure out what's that little thing that's kind of magic to you. What causes awe and wonder in your life? And pursue that, even if maybe it doesn't make sense, okay? Because if you're passionate about something and you're excited about something, you'll give your best to it, and that's important. Second thing is, success is much bigger than your career. The reality is, okay, you can have the best job in the world, earning all the money in the world, but actually, life is about way more than that. You know, I built my life and my career around something other than just how do I earn the most money. It was partly where do I want to live? Who do I want my friends to be? Right? The ability to take my kids surfing at the weekend is every bit as important to me as what I do Monday to Friday. So success is bigger than your career. The third thing I'd say is surround yourself with good people. The truth is, so much of what you might describe as success in my career ultimately is to do with the team that I'm a part of. It's to do with the PhD students that I work with, my colleagues within the department. And part of my role now really is making sure that I've got really good people around me who give me good advice, who encourage me, who support me. And you can do the same. For you, it's your friends, right? So make sure that you've got friends around you who are supportive and encouraging and maybe at times challenging. So my fourth bit of advice is, and this is probably the trickiest one to get right, figure out what it looks like to be likable. Okay, the sociologists have a special word for it. They call it agreeableness. Because actually, when I look around me, the people who are most successful in their careers, and actually probably in life, are people who've figured out how to get on with other people, who have figured out how to be liked. And I think for me, that was part of how I managed to get into Cambridge, is because I presented myself on those interviews as a likable, agreeable person. Think about what that looks like for you. And then the final one is this. In a couple of hours, I'm going to get off the train in Swansea, and I'm going to walk across 3 words that are engraved into the floor at the entrance to the train station. And the 3 words are, ambition is critical. Ambition is massive, okay? The truth is, the biggest thing that puts us off being ambitious or limits our ambition is the fear of failure, okay? What I've experienced so far in my career is, it's really important to have big, ambitious goals. It really isn't the end of the world, even if you don't achieve those goals. You know, we're working on the Bloodhound project at the moment that has this incredibly ambitious target of designing a car to travel at 1,000 miles an hour. The truth is, it doesn't matter that much whether or not we ever achieve that. It's the lessons that we will have learned along the way that is the most important thing. The truth is, in life, actually, the destination isn't as important as the journey itself. And with that, I'll say thank you very much for listening. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you.
Ben, that was amazing. Thank you very much indeed. Diolch o galon. Let's see what questions we have for you. So who's someone in your profession that you really admire?
Yeah, good question. So my PhD supervisor, so when I arrived at Swansea 20 odd years ago at the university, my PhD supervisor, Professor Ken Morgan, was someone who really took me under his wing, taught me so much of what has been kind of the basis now for my career, and has been really a mentor to me throughout the years. So having that person in my life, and he's still plugging away, he's now almost 80, still plugging away as an academic, still passionate about what he does. And you know, on so many levels, I'm like, when I get to that age, I kind of want to be like that. So,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, here's another question. What advice would you give to your younger self?
Yeah, okay. Don't worry so much is definitely a big one that I would say. You know, when you're young, it's really hard when you're your age to kind of take that and make that real. The truth is, the older you get, the more you realize stuff doesn't matter as much as you thought it did. And actually, try not to worry so much. And in that, building confidence, I think, would be a big thing.
Also, you've got an amazing energy as well. Where does that come from? Does that come from your upbringing, do you think?
Yeah, I think, again, I think it's about getting that balance in life, right? So for me, I know there are things in my life that bring energy. So one of them is surfing, right? One of them is music, and making sure that I build those things into my life, which sit outside, you know, my formal career, but allow me to have that energy within my career, I think is massive.
Fabulous. How do you stay motivated and overcome challenges in your work, Ben?
Yeah, that's really hard. So kind of staying motivated is part of this word resilience that we talk about lots. Because the reality is, however successful you are, wherever life takes you, you're going to get thrown negativity every now and again. You're going to come up against challenges. And I think part of that is just reminding yourself why you do it. Like, what's the big objective here? What am I trying to achieve? So for me, as an aerospace engineer, there's a massive goal at the moment, which is how do we transition the aerospace industry to net zero? How do we fly around the world in the future and not pollute the planet? And that's like the big overarching goal. That's why we're teaching students. That's why we're doing research. And every now and again, reminding yourself why you do what you do is massive.
Wonderful. If you could have a conversation with anyone throughout history, dead or alive,
Ooh, yeah.
who would it be?
Do you know what, right? I was just thinking about it before I came on when I heard this question. A few years ago, as part of the Bloodhound project, I got to go to South Africa, which is where we do the high-speed testing of the car. And I went out to Robben Island when Nelson Mandela was in prison for all those years. And I read that fantastic book of his. And I think he'd be someone I'd love to sit down and have a cup of coffee with, because I think, again, going back to that thing of resilience, there's someone who must know what it looks like to be resilient.
Absolutely. What a hero. Any questions from our audience?
If you were stranded on an island, you could only take 3 things. What would you choose?
Oh, stranded on an island, 3 things. A radio, so I can listen to Jason on the radio.
Thank you very much.
I think I'd want something that helped me connect back to the real world, because I think after a little while, I think that isolation would be an issue. For me, I would take a Bible. I think it's the best book ever written, and it's full of amazing advice, and I think I'd love to have that with me. And then probably a few of my favorite records. Of course, I'd need a record player to play them on, which would make it a 4th thing. But
well, you could take the record player and the records as part of the 3rd thing, can you?
Go on, we'll do that then, yeah.
Yeah. What about surfboard?
Yeah, well, I hadn't thought about that. You know what? Let's go. I take Jason because he gives
the
good
radio,
advice.
take the surfboard. Please join me in thanking once again Professor Ben Evans for a truly inspirational talk.
Thank you very much. To be successful, you need to be resilient. Think of a time where you last received some negative feedback. And have a think about the next time you receive some negative feedback. What are you going to do differently? How are you going to build your resilience?